In this video, I'm going to give you my predictions for UFC Vegas 96. As always, you can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. At the top of the card in our main event, we have two of the better middleweights in the world between the Killer Gorilla Jared Cannonier and Caio Borralho. If you've watched this channel for a while, you know I'm a big Jared Cannonier guy. I think he's had one of the most impressive careers in the UFC. He hasn't been a champion, but when you talk about longevity, level of competition, the only fighter to have knockouts across 3 different weight divisions. We're not counting Conor McGregor knocking out Cowboy Cerrone, come on. At 40 years old, still a top contender at 185 pounds, crazy punching power, somehow great cardio despite carrying all that muscle around. Awesome chin, Jason Herzog should know that, and strong takedown defense. Now on the other side, you've got Caio Borralho, who seems to be, I don't know, the leader of the best gym in MMA right now. And he, as well as the rest of the fighting nerds, have looked nothing short of unstoppable. He's 16-1 as a pro on a 16-fight unbeaten streak, 6-0 in the UFC. And the scary part is he can do it all. There's a chance he's the best grappler in the division. Now you still have guys like Brendan Allen, Fluffy Hernandez, Khamzat Chimaev in whatever hospital bed he's hiding in. Those guys are in the mix, so it's hard to say for certain that Caio Borralho is the best grappler in the division, but eventually he might end up showing you that he is. And we've seen him put that striking on display last time out, knocking Paul Craig out cold. We saw him outstrike Michal Leksichuk before submitting him. He's recorded knockdowns in his last 2 fights. Now 31 years old, firmly, squarely in that fighting prime. But now he's taken a big step up in competition. He's never seen this much experience, strength in the clinch, overall presence in the octagon, just veteran know-how. And on top of that, Jared Cannonier constantly at this point in his career is fighting 5 rounds. Borralho's only been 5 rounds once, and that was years ago. So I could see a situation where Jared Cannonier keeps the fight standing, lands that big power he has, and just makes it a long night for Caio Borralho, who really isn't going to be able to get going. That's a possibility. But I think the more likely outcome here is that Borralho is the first man to submit Jared Cannonier. The dude's ceiling is unknown, but I wouldn't be shocked if I see him fighting for the belt in the next 24 months. There's a bit of a logjam at the top of the division, but I think if he wins this one and gets a win over another top guy, he'll be undeniable at that point. But there really isn't anything that we've seen that would make me believe that he can't compete at the top of the division against the best of the best. He's clearly a fighter who leaves no stone unturned in preparation. So even though this is 5 rounds, I don't really see him getting tired in this one. I also don't see him playing Jared Cannonier's game on the feet. It's clear that his best path to victory is by getting this fight to the ground, controlling the Killer Gorilla, and trying to find that back. And I expect him to do some good work on the feet, keep Jared Cannonier moving back, but he's going to find his opportunities to get to the clinch and get to the ground, because he's not going to come in fighting a bad game plan. These guys never do. And the way I think this fight ends is he gets Jared Cannonier up to the fence, jumps on his back, and rear naked chokes him from a standing position. Now historically, he values position over submission, but I like my chances here with 25 minutes to work. So give me the younger man, the momentum, the natural. Give me Caio Borralho inside the distance. Give me Caio Borralho by submission. And real quick, if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm. You know how the algorithm works. Next we have a fight between Angela Hill fighting Tabatha Ricci. You look at the betting lines for this week's fight card, and there's a lot of chalk. Big favorites up and down the card, and I know a lot of you don't like betting on women's MMA. You've been burned before, you can't trust it. But this is one of the few fights on the card that gives you a line that's actually playable on either side. And I think the betting side here is very obvious, and I'm going to get into why. We're going to kind of unwrap it as we go through, but there's a side of this matchup I love. Tabatha Ricci's fought stiff competition lately with mixed results, being 1-1 in her last 2 fights, both split decisions, but you can tell she's getting better fight to fight, and she's getting matched up with better fighters. So that's kind of a natural, pretty smooth progression. And you got to acknowledge the trajectory that Baby Shark is on, because she's rounding out the skill set. She came into the UFC with that rich judo background, but it looks like the striking is starting to catch up, because she hasn't been out-grappled in the UFC yet. She's only really been outstruck, but she's facing better and better strikers each time out, which is the case this week. Angela Hill's a much better striker. She's been there, she's done that, she's fought everyone. We've talked about Angela Hill countless times because, like the broadcast likes to mention, Angela Hill fights every 3 weeks. A true workhorse for the UFC, and just a vet's vet who's going to give you a good fight every time, and is in good form. She's won 4 of her last 5. She's coming off a submission win over Luana Pinheiro. She was an underdog in the 3 previous wins, and it's not as if Angela Hill at 39 years old is getting better, but she's just extremely well-rounded and consistent. But that's important because we kind of know what we're going to get from her. So if she gets matched up with a fighter who is not at the top of their game, has any kind of hole in their game like cardio, not great striking, poor grappling, she's going to exploit those and get over on those people every time. But if you're a fighter who's coming in good shape, with a full camp, without major holes in your game, that's when she tends to lose. Like against the tiny tornado Tecia Torres, Amanda Lemos, although not a great decision, but we'll put a pin in that and come back to that in a minute. Vina Jandiroba, Mackenzie Dern, even before that, you can look at fights like Michelle Waterson, Claudia Gadelha. The kids don't know about Claudia Gadelha. She loses to these fighters, but fighters like Luana Pinheiro, who has a bad gas tank, Denise Gomes, who has a high ceiling but very green, and Angela Hill caught her at the right time. She couldn't really defend takedowns in that fight, and Angela Hill made her pay for it. You got Emily Ducote, one-dimensional striker, no longer in the UFC. Even Lupi Godinez, well-rounded but not at the top of her game. She takes that fight on short notice, just a bad look altogether, like Luana Santos last week. You can't just take a fight short notice if you ain't built for it, basically. So you got to be careful with the short notice stuff, especially if you're not somebody who's made a reputation of doing that. There's a reason why when people step in on short notice, they kind of get a pass for losing. So just be mindful of that. So while I got respect for Angela Hill, I love Tabatha Ricci in this fight. Full camp, much younger, the better grappler. On paper, Hill throws more, might be more active in the fight, but Ricci has a way of making it look like she's doing more in these fights, and she has a very judge-friendly style because of it. You look at her last two fights, again, both split decisions. The fight against Lupi Godinez, she lost every round, but somehow it was a split decision loss only. One judge had her winning all 3 rounds, which is ridiculous. You also look at her last fight, which shows up as a win for her against Tecia Torres. She lost that fight. She did not win. And as a little bit of a conspiracy theory from a financial standpoint for the UFC, you got to pay Angela Hill way more money than you pay Tabatha Ricci. I would argue that Angela Hill's show money is probably double what Tabatha Ricci's show and win money is. So if you're somebody who believes that fights can be manipulated from a scoring perspective for financial reasons, well, there's one for you right there. But even if that's not the case, you look at some of Angela Hill's fights, like against Waterson, Gadelha, Lemos. She's winning these fights. You go back and you watch, and your eyes tell you that she's winning, and then the judges tell you that she's not. I've never seen a fighter get more bad calls than Angela Hill. Never, ever, ever. And I don't think that changes this week. If the fight's close at all, Tabatha Ricci's going to get the rounds, and that makes her the easiest button you're going to click on your sports book this week. Give me the baby shark. Give me Tabatha Ricci to win this fight by decision. And Tabatha Ricci probably finds herself on the official betting article of the week that would have spazzed if Tai Tuivasa and Jairzinho Rozenstruik took some chances. I'm done with the anti-knockout glove narrative. It was cool for a second. I even bought it. But when you see 125-pound Kai Kara-France knocking Steve Erceg, who's got a good chin, all over the place with these tiny gloves on, now I don't believe it anymore. I just think the big boys were trying not to lose that one. So anyway, official betting article of the week can be found on KunithMMA.com. The prop of the week can also be found on KunithMMA.com. Last week it was Josh Cooleybout inside the distance. He's about to finish the fight and decides to let the guy lay on his back for 2 minutes. I hate it. But I love the prop of the week this week, and if you put your email in at the bottom, I'll be sending it out probably Friday to give you as much time as possible so that nobody misses the prop of the week, and then I get messages about how you missed it. Don't want that. I want you to make sure you have it. So I'll send that out later in the week, but I love it this week. You can get everything on KunithMMA.com, the official betting article, prop of the week, community forum access, and all the DFS tools you need to be successful next week. All that can be found in the description and in a pinned comment. Back to the breakdown. Next, we have a fight between Michael Morales and Neil Magny. The line for this is crazy wide, but completely justified. Michael Morales coming in at -600, but he absolutely should win this fight. Neil Magny's not really going to offer the young man much in this fight. Magny does a good job, or once upon a time did a great job of controlling guys against the fence, just outworking his opponents there, outworking them over 15 minutes, but Morales isn't going to get tired. He won't be held against the cage for extended periods of time. He's not going to lose rounds because he falls behind on the activity. I think he's just going to flow. I think Morales is going to know pretty early in this fight that Magny's not able to hurt him. This is a guy who's undefeated, never really even been that hurt in the octagon. Magny's not somebody who's going to put a whole lot of sting on his strikes, and I think that once he realizes that, he's just going to piece Magny up, get the time in, get the minutes in, land harder straight punches down the middle, and he's not going to make a whole lot of mistakes, and if he does make mistakes, so what? Neil Magny's not really going to make him pay for it. So the way that you bet this one is you take the over on the round props, or you take Morales by decision. I think Magny's going to move enough, burn enough clock, maybe get to the clinch occasionally, but he's not going to get knocked out, I don't think. I just think Morales wins comfortably, wins a decision. We don't got to go too deep on this one. If you want to take him, great. If you don't, whatever. But I do think that even at minus 600, you could plug him into parlays. If you've got a lot of legs, just beef up the odds a little bit more. But give me the younger man, the hot prospect, the undefeated Michael Morales by decision. Next, we have another fight between a young man and a not so young man, with Edmen Shahbazyan fighting Gerald Meerschaert this week. And I mean this fight. It's a trap! I agree with Admiral Akbar. It feels that way. The line for this is pretty wide, and you look at this fight, this is exactly the kind of guy that Gerald Meerschaert somehow finds a way to beat. Edmen Shahbazyan is sharp at range, lots of power. The UFC gave him a little bit too much too soon, and now they don't know how to match him up, because how do you go from fighting guys who can seemingly fight for the title, then fighting Dolce Lungambula and AJ Dobson, but then having Fluffy Hernandez in the middle of those two fights? Doesn't make any sense. And I don't really think it's their fault, because you put him in there against guys who aren't good and he runs through them, and it's like, okay, they should have never been matched up in the first place. But then you put him against guys that are good and they run through Shahbazyan, oh, he should never been there in the first place. So he's very much a tweener, somebody who probably can fight the guys that are just about to be ranked or maybe just outside of the rankings, but once you start matching them up with top 10 talent, that's when you're going to have a problem. And Gerald Meerschaert's kind of in that same category. Like, Shahbazyan's gotten stars and scrubs matchmaking, and Gerald Meerschaert is sometimes a scrub and sometimes he's choking you out before you even know what's happening. If the fight's standing, Gerald Meerschaert should struggle mightily. He's got some of the slower hands in the division. There's a good chance that Shahbazyan just takes him out, lights him up on the feet, gets him out of there in the first round. If he doesn't, he's probably going to gas. And Gerald Meerschaert's going to gas out too. It seems like he gasses out every fight, but he fights the same way when he's fresh versus when he's tired, and that's what makes him very dangerous. He's got a way of hanging in there and finding his way to the clinch, finding his way to the mat, wrapping up a neck as well as anybody we've seen ever in the sport at this size. He's number 4 all time in UFC history when it comes to submission wins, number 1 all time in the UFC's middleweight division in submission wins. Edmen Shahbazyan's been in the UFC for a while now, but his only noteworthy win is Brad Tavares when he knocked him out with a head kick, which is fantastic. Everybody else that he's beaten, no good, not in the UFC. And when he's been given the step up in competition, he's failed to rise to the occasion over and over again. So is GM3 elite? No. Is this really a huge step up in competition? Not really. But Gerald Meerschaert is tricky and dangerous, and oddly enough, you need to do a lot of the right things to beat him. You can't make a whole lot of mistakes to get a win over him. And I think that if this fight gets extended as Shahbazyan starts to slow down, he's going to make mistakes. So I like the value on the dog. I think Meerschaert can get this fight to the ground, weather an early storm, and then find a submission, just add another one to the tally. So give me Gerald Meerschaert. Give me GM3 to win this fight by submission. Next, we have a fight between Vyacheslav Borshov fighting James Lontop. Lontop lost his UFC debut and is looking to get back on track. Tough Peruvian young fighter who's going to let his hands go. And this is interesting matchmaking because Vyacheslav Borshov, this is what he's been asking for. He's been matched up several times now with guys that are going to take him down, and he might have some of the worst takedown defense in the UFC. He's just never gotten it figured out, and at 32 years old, I don't think that's going to change. But he comes into this one being a huge favorite despite being one-dimensional, which realistically, being that one-dimensional in the UFC, he should never be favored. That's how bad he is on the mat. But James Lontop's probably not going to be shooting for takedowns in this one. He's going to stand and bang, and that's what Borshov wants. That's what gives him the best chance to win. We haven't really seen anybody be able to stand with him in years. Every time they try, they've gotten knocked out. So James Lontop could very easily be added to the club this week. He's hittable. He's going to stand right in front of Borshov, and this is do or die mode for Borshov. He's got to win this fight and look good to keep his UFC roster spot. But Lontop's got that Peruvian chin, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago with Rolando Bedoya. Peruvian fighters just don't really get knocked out like that. Super durable. So I think that if he doesn't get knocked out, I don't expect him to lose a decision. I think that Borshov would wear a lot more damage if he's getting caught, and that would swing the rounds for Lontop. I also wouldn't be surprised if Lontop knocks him out. You look at Borshov's last fight against Chase Hooper. Hooper opened up a life-changing can of whoop-ass on him. It doesn't matter if the strikes were on the ground. He was pounding on this guy, and that's a beating that fighters take, and then they don't come back exactly the same. James Lontop was out-grappled in his UFC debut against Chris Padilla on short notice. It was shocking. He was a big favorite. We had high expectations. He lost, but it's not as if he got the shit kicked out of him, basically. So I expect both these guys to land, and I just like the younger fighter at plus money. I think that he's going to land a lot this week. I think he's going to hurt Borshov, possibly finish him. The size, the youth, the lack of wear and tear all points to James Lontop winning this fight. Give me Lontop to win by knockout. Next, we got a fight between Jose Medina fighting Zach Reese this week. At first glance, you're like, oh, this fight's a no-brainer. Zach Reese destroys this guy. Let's move on. And I'm here to tell you today that's not going to happen. I'm just kidding. It is going to happen. But I hate how wide the line is because Zach Reese is not many fights, just a fight removed from being knocked out by Cody Brundage. Not a good look, and something that will make me question the durability for a while, although we know Cody Brundage can crack, but so can Jose Medina. That's pretty much all he can do. On the mat, Zach Reese is a more dangerous grappler, and he's probably the better striker as well. I do just worry about him getting hit because it's not impossible for him to get caught this week. I think the bet that makes the most sense is taking the under a round and a half, or even under a half of a round if you think this is getting done in the first 2.5 minutes, which I think that it does. But we don't need to go too crazy in this one. I think the better fighter is favored here. I think that Zach Reese probably wins this fight. Give me Reese to win by knockout. Next, we're looking at a fight between Josiana Nunes fighting Jacqueline Cavalcante this week. Cavalcante being favored, it being women's MMA. I'm sitting here looking for a path for Josie Nunes. Josie Nunes just going to knock her out, put that big power on her because Cavalcante is going to want to strike as well. But I just don't think that's the case. I think that Josiana Nunes has benefited from maybe the easiest 4-fight stretch when it comes to UFC matchmaking we've ever seen. Bea Malecki, Romana Pascal, Zara Farn, Chelsea Chandler, like these are the worst fighters that she could have been given, and she ends up being 3-1 in these fights. So she's given a good account of herself, but at the same time, she's not really fighting anybody. And Cavalcante is coming off of the win over Zara Farn as well. It's not like she's fought the highest level of competition, but she's younger, she's bigger, she's longer, she throws more strikes, she gets hit way less. I think for Nunes, she's going to do her best work if this fight is just an all-out brawl and she's able to close distance, get in close, and just throw wild hooks. But I think that Cavalcante is just going to pick her apart from range, land a lot, disrupt that Josiane Nunes rhythm, and I just think this is overall a bad matchup for Nunes. I think Nunes is much better against a fighter who has to take her down, somebody who's not going to land a ton of strikes, somebody who's worried about the power, maybe somebody who's been knocked out before, dropped before, but you're not going to get that from Cavalcante. I think that Cavalcante just puts it on her, lands a lot, keeps moving, and wins the minutes. So give me the favorite here. Give me Jacqueline Cavalcante to win this fight by decision. And the last fight we're looking at, and you might think, Kunith, what about the Ultimate Fighter fights? Well, I have to look at them throughout the week because I don't watch the Ultimate Fighter. There's a time where you came off the Ultimate Fighter, it was a big deal. Tony Ferguson, Rashad Evans. I looked at the guys who were fighting on the Ultimate Fighter this time, no idea. It's lost its luster a little bit, but I'll have to look at that throughout the week, and I'll give you my picks for those 2 fights and final picks later in the week. But now we're looking at a fight between Kong Wang. She's fighting Victoria Leonardo. I've seen screenshots of people on Twitter getting Kong Wang for like plus 165 all the way to plus 120. She's currently minus 800 on the books, which is absurd, but this is the opponent that you could look minus 800 against. Just like Michael Morales, I think that even though she's a ridiculous favorite, if you have a parlay, like you're parlaying the whole card kind of deal, you got a lot of legs, you can throw her in there because Victoria Leonardo really doesn't offer that much. She's a fall guy in this situation. She's getting put in there to lose. I think that Wang is going to look great. I think Wang probably submits her sometime in the second round. I think that she makes it look easy. She's going to look minus 800 in there. Give me Kong Wang to win this fight by submission. And that'll do it for the predictions video. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for helping the channel hit 10,000 subscribers. I made the post about it. I'm not going to stand up here and dance for you. But I really do appreciate all the support. I appreciate all the viewership as well. Like, I sent this to a buddy of mine who's got about 60,000 subscribers in another space, and he was shocked by the amount of views that the channel was doing for just hitting 10,000 subscribers. Like, I looked at some of what I'll call the competitors out there, looked at their UFC 305 predictions videos. I'm beating a lot of them, and it's really all because of you guys. Like, I got some analytics. You guys share the hell out of the videos. Love that. Likes are flowing, comments, discourse in the comments, love it all. So overwhelming support from you guys has made all of it possible. Very happy to see what this looks like, because started in October 21, and then by February 24, we hit 5,000 subscribers. So that means it roughly took 30 months from 0 to 5,000 but then it took about 5 months from 5,000 to 10,000. So I'm excited to see where we're at by year's end, where we're at this time next year. Not going anywhere. We're in this for the long haul. I'm not an old man. On the channel a while ago, I said that I was 55 and a lot of you guys believed me, but I'm a young man. I could do this for a while. So I'm in it for the long run. Strap in. We're going to have a lot of fun. And I really appreciate all the support. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm. I'll see you later in the week for final picks. Let's go.